These Skeletons by Jason Morningstar. This is a very unusual game. Physically, this is the game. This is what you get. It is a short book. I saw the game on a shelf in a brick-and-mortar game store. I almost said brick-and-mortar, which would really fit the thing. It was there in the store. It was on the role-playing game shelf, and it is a role-playing game, but I would almost say in a sense. The author himself must be aware of the fact that this doesn't qualify exactly as a role-playing game. It is a strange experience. This is what the game is. The back cover tells us, in fact, the Skeletons is meditative, structured, free-form game from 1 to 6 players. Meditative, structured, free-form game. That's a good description. As you see, it's very different from I'm gonna attack the orc with my battle axe and I'm gonna roll a die and apply modifiers. That's really different from what many role-playing games are. It is an independent role-playing game in the sense, not just that it's not published by one of the big publishers, but also, most importantly, in the fact that it uses unusual, non-mainstream mechanics, and also it just provides you with a type of experience which is in fact very unique. Another thing that I think could be useful to understand the game, again from the back cover, melancholy, introspective, and spanning epochs, the Skeletons is unlike anything you've ever played, and this is true. It plays from 1 to 6 players. You will need a few hours, you will need a private space. In fact, it is better if it's a cozy, isolated space. It is also a space in which you need to be able to turn off the light and really to be in the dark for periods of time. So if you're planning to play it at 2 p.m. in your living room, big windows, that doesn't exactly create the exact atmosphere. The game, in fact, is a lot about atmosphere. Structurally speaking, the game is, you could think of it as a script, as a flexible script. The game will start by telling you a story. First you create your character, then the game describes a situation, but it's a very minimalistic description. It is meant to feel lacking. It is meant to be like a script, and then you create the images. If you're playing with other people, then you're simply fleshing out the stories, adding details to the situation. You can play by yourself simply by creating the story in your mind. And then the situation may lead to different situations, which again will all be described as essential, purposefully lacking scripts, again in the sense that they lack detail, because that is when you really make the story your own. Do you win? Do you lose? Well, the game ends usually with your death, if that's the right word, and we'll see why. The game ends with your end as you dissolve into nothingness, with then some variants, etc., etc. But basically, it's a narrative game. It is a storytelling game. You're creating a story together with somebody else, or you're creating a story in your head and experiencing the story itself. You don't get to win or to lose. You're a winner in the sense that you experience something very new and very different. As for the theme, the Skeleton is, well, it is set in a fantasy world, one that you know. Doesn't matter which one, you choose one. It can be Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons. It can be any fantasy world that you know from high fantasy role-playing games, or you can make up your own. It is a world in which there are monsters, in which there is the undead, and some of the undeads are the skeletons. Some of the most undignified villains, really, in role-playing. They're usually not very scary, unless they are the skeleton of a super powerful mage. Skeletons, rats, goblins, those are usually the punching bags for level 1, level 2 heroes, and now you are one of these, let's say, losers of fantasy. You are an animated skeleton. You quote-unquote wake up in your tomb, and there isn't much to do, really. What happens is that you're a skeleton, you're being bound by a curse to haunt a tomb, in which maybe there are different objectives that you have. You're trying to protect a certain objective, to keep away intruders. The general idea is that you're cursed to be the defender of this tomb. And from time to time, maybe there are tomb raiders that are coming in, maybe there are rats that are sneaking in and they want to try to gnaw your bones. Maybe other kind of intruders come in. But it's not going to be that much of a hectic life, because maybe one of these encounters will happen every couple of decades. You successfully kill those looters, and then for like 40 years, 60, 70 years, hundreds of years, no one really comes in again. It's already a very interesting situation. It's one that is very different, and one that you're unlikely to have experienced in role playing. And even if you play a traditional role playing in which there's an expansion that lets you be the monster, say, like back in the day, gargoyles were only non-playing enemies, and there are expansions to Pathfinder in which you can be the gargoyle. Even if you find a game in which you can be the skeleton, chances are that the skeleton is going to be handled like, a playing character. You want to do more or less the things you do with the wizard, or with the rogue, or with the warrior. You're there fighting, looting, whatever. Here you're doing what skeletons really do all the time, which is nothing, which is not much. So there's already right there a dark, but not dark in a sense of mysterious and fascinating, dark in a sense of a gloomy, again, it's a melancholy situation. You start by choosing one of possible skeletons. Maybe you're the skeletons of a monster, maybe you're a skeleton that was beheaded, maybe you are different types of weird skeletons. Maybe you wake up and you realize that there is a shield with arrows on it next to you, and then you're wondering, oh, maybe that's why a round shield peppered with arrows protects your bones. Maybe some of those arrows actually are what caused my death. You create your skeleton from a range of available ones, or you just make it up out of nowhere, and you start creating your background, again, in your head, or narrating the game with others. And then you start with the first situation that has several options, so you will decide or randomly determine what is the situation that you're facing, and then based on certain things that will happen, I don't want to give you spoilers, but based on certain things that will happen, at the end of that encounter, there will be a break, in which, simply put, you are supposed to meditate. You're supposed to try to experience, in some sense, the gloom, the silence, the nothingness, the nihilism of just sitting there in some sort of slumber in a tomb for decades. So you turn off the light, and then simply for a period of time you don't do anything. You sit there in the dark. Again, it doesn't sound very glamorous, but to start with, this is not a game that clearly meant to be glamorous. Meant to give you, again, a sort of like meditation on life, death, undeath, a purposeless existence. I think that is kind of like the point, really. This is a nihilistic game which is about trying to experience a pointless experience. You're alive, but there isn't much to do. You're alive, but it doesn't make any difference. There will be time, but there's nothing worth doing with that time. It's really almost like if Samuel Beckett ever wrote a role-playing game, probably it would be this one. The idea of surviving to death when you're not alive anyways. So the game is, again, in chapters or acts that are punctuated by periods in which the room is in the dark, and you simply think about what happened. So it's a role-playing game. Probably if at the end you timed it, or somebody timed it for you, it's a game in which for most of the times, or for a good chunk of time, nothing happens. People are alone with their thoughts in their heads, and then from time to time they're creating new chapters about what happens to them, and having these flashbacks in which they are recollecting episodes from their life. Again, the character is recollecting them, you are making them up as you go. So it really is a framework for you to create a story with your friends, or to create a story for yourself in which you are the only author and the only audience. I enjoyed playing it. I can't say I had fun. I can say definitely that I had a very unique experience, and one that was captivating, at the end of which I was happy that I played it. I was happy to have experienced this strange narrative, because it's so refreshing, because it is so different, because I have a nihilistic streak myself in my mind also. It resonated with me. Maybe it's not by chance that Samuel Beckett is one of my favorite authors. So definitely was a fascinating experience. I can't say it's a fun experience. I can say it was a blast. And this game is gonna be far from being a universal crowd pleaser. It will only apply to a very small niche of committed role players that really want to try something different, something unique. And even for those, it's not for every day. Even for me, I wouldn't. There are days in which I'm like, well, I just feel like slaying a dragon by using my flaming battle axe as I'm riding a giant phoenix or doom or something like that. Sometimes you want to have that fun of like, I don't know, I would almost call it performance porn that you have in some form in some role-playing games. So like crazy performances with powerful battle maneuvers with incredible spells is what you're enjoying. You're enjoying the pyrotechnics. And some of the times you feel like you want to enjoy the silence, the dark, the nothingness, the gloom. If it's one of those days, or better, one of those evenings, one of those nights, and you're one of those players, you're one of those players in the small, graced niche that will be interested in experience something like this, then, well, The Skeletons by Jason Morningstar. Now you know this exists. I'm recommending it, yes, but only to this very self-selected group. In general, definitely was an extremely interesting, unusual experience, and one then, within its own parameters, in its own way, it is an experience that was enjoyable, that was significant, that was very unique.